So welcome to the February 22nd edition of our Kubernetes SIG CLI bi-weekly meeting. I'm Sean Sullivan. I am your host. We will dig directly into the announcements today. Is the agenda being presented? Great, thank you. So let's have a couple of version 127 announcements. The code freeze is in about 3 weeks, 1 day less than 3 weeks, on March 14th. And the scheduled release is about 4 weeks after that on Tuesday, April 11th. So we've already passed the enhancement freeze, which was back on February 9th. So another item which is more geared towards some of the chairs, which is that we have the SIG CLI annual report. I have the link there for the report, or for the starting of the report. It should be started by March 23rd, or sorry, March 24th, and it should be merged by April 7th. Does anybody else have any other announcements they'd like to present to the rest of the community? If not, we could move on to the next section, which is newer members introducing themselves. If that's what you'd like to do, this is completely voluntary. If you'd like to get the rest of your SIG CLI colleagues to meet you, then please speak up now. Is there anyone who would like to introduce themselves, who is new or hasn't been here for a while?
Yeah, hey everyone, I hope I'm audible. Okay, so my name is Sriram. I've been working with Kubernetes now for like 6-7 months on a daily basis, and like this is the first time that I'm joining one of these calls. I've been part of the SIG docs channels and their meetings in the past, but I've never I've only been a lurker in the SIG CLI channels. Yeah, I hope to take part more in this and hopefully learn and contribute more in the future. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you. Is there anyone else who'd like to introduce themselves?
Yep, I can go ahead next. Hey folks, I'm Varsha. I've been active in Kubernetes 6 related to kubebuilder and controller runtime. I'm here just to learn, know more about kubecli and start contributing to it since it's closely related to operator SDK, which is also a CLI tool too. So yeah, just here to learn and contribute.
Welcome. Okay, so why don't we move to the next section, which is our sub-project and KEP updates. I see that Nick has put something in for KUI. Would you like to speak, Nick?
Sure, nothing major, just a few minor bug fixes. We released a feature in the last, in 13.1 to do a better job in drilling down from showing container details for pods and drilling down from pods to PVCs and PVs, and just a few minor bug fixes in those new features. Nothing major.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, the PVC thing is, I don't know, finally got that in place. Pretty handy, actually.
Nice. So are there any other updates on KEPs or sub-projects? If not, we could move to the main section. And we've got a couple of items, one from Arda, and then following that, one from Marley. Arda, would you like to go first?
Yes, hi. Regarding the interactivity flag for delete commands, we had an asynchronous discussions on the PR, and there are good suggestions about what should be the behavior for that flag. And I just wanted to bring that topic in here to reach a consensus, because these are, although all of them are good. They are conflicting, and we should choose one of them. I wrote pros and cons of each option, and yeah, the main question is how interactivity flag should behave. For example, should we support yes to all option? Should we support yes or no, etc.
If I remember correctly from the PR, there are actually more than two options. But the main two options are between whether we want to present the entire list of resources you're going to remove, or are we going to do it one by one? And then the question comes to whether we want to allow the all or not. And then depending on the first question, the all will work differently. That's a lot of the question, but I would probably, the all is most likely less of a problem. But the biggest question is, do we want to present the entire list of resources that the delete will remove? Or rather, we want to do it in a strictly iterative way where before removing a particular resource, we are issuing a questions. Are you sure you want to remove X? And then the user has to make a decision. And then again, are you sure you want to remove Y? And then the decision. Or we're more comfortable with scrape the list first and then issue the deletes in bulk.
One thing that this workflow reminded me of is git add in patch mode. So it sort of gives you the ability to do both those things, right? Like it shows you hunks of well, code in that case, but you can further subdivide them if you want. So like maybe one option that would be similar to that flow would be we show them the whole list by default, but if they put like S for split, then it splits it down into, you know, groups of 5 or something. And then if they do split again, then it goes one by one. And so you only ever have yes, there's no all, but it's yes to whatever we just showed you, but you have the ability to interactively make those chunks more granular if you want. Then you kind of get both. What do you think?
I'll let others speak before I'll say my opinion. Eddie, you were the first one working on this topic. Do you have any opinions? Not hearing Eddie. So for me, I was, yeah.
Eddie's first implementation attempted to use the third one. Actually, I mimicked that in my PR, and after that, there are yes and no options, no yes to all option. And after that, after Brian suggested to showing the list of all the resources and yes or no, but there is no partial deletion, I changed my implementation to the second one. But honestly, I'm now Katrina proposed fourth one, and we have 4 options actually.
Yeah, I would prefer to keep it super simple. The ability to divide into chunks, although it seems nice, I'm worried that it will unnecessarily complicate the code behind the delete that we already have. And I'm personally a fan of issuing a question before every delete. which will most likely be problematic when you issue label selector deletes when you're removing several resources. But in the majority of cases where you're removing just one, it should work fine, I guess.
The thing that matters most to me is that like it's always super clear what they're about to delete. So like a world where you have an option where we're showing you one thing and you have a yes or yes to all, I think that's not clear enough, because what does all mean? All of what you've seen so far, what the set we haven't shown you yet. So I like the one at a time, or the show them all and the only option they have is all. Or like actually what I suggested could be done as an iteration on the latter. Like if we start off with showing them everything we're going to delete and give them a yes or no and that's it, then in a future release we could add the S option that then breaks it down if needed. Like that's compatible for what it's worth.
I mean, we can probably start with the iterative mode being, we could probably label the flag as an experimental and implement it as a simple yes, no, without any additional actions. And let's wait for users' feedback, whether they will be more request for all type of operation or not. And if nobody will complain, we'll just either leave it as is, or we will turn over to the all, maybe. I don't know. That was my proposal.
I guess which direction is it easier to move in is the question that I would have. Like if the default behavior was one at a time, how would we move from that to introducing the other modes without making a breaking change? And I guess if I'm thinking about where this is most valuable to have interactive, like which side should we optimize for? Because I think you're right that like we will have users that are doing both. Like we'll have some that are typically deleting 3 things at once and then yes, no problem. And ones that are like trying to delete a huge list and that's really tedious to hit yes that many times. So like to which user is the feature more valuable? And I think where this feature has come up a lot when we're doing issue triage is the latter, where they have like a large set of resources that they did not want to delete. So I would almost be inclined to optimize for that user in the initial version, because to them, like that's who we're really saving from the foot gun with this feature.
Two quick questions. Firstly, why are we calling it confirm rather than interactive? Just thinking the Unix conventions, I say rm-I. I don't say rm-confirm.
We are going to change that.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, that was one of my questions, that it should be interactive when we from the initial get-go.
Nice. Okay, then the next question, it seems to me that maybe we could find a marriage of some of these to say that maybe the default is one at a time, but instead of just a Y and N, you could be L could be one of the options, and you type L, it lists all the things that have matched. And if you have capital Y or something, it just deletes them all, or A deletes them all or something. That way you can, maybe with a single experience, you can cover both bases.
Yeah, that's kind of the opposite of the split thing I proposed, I guess. Like you have one, so that you can go in both directions. You have yes, no for what you're seeing now, and then you have like show me a different list, a bigger list or smaller list, basically with the command. And then I would say like we'd want either way for that extra option to just be producing that list, and you still need a Y or an N explicitly against what you're currently being shown.
I see.
But just because deletion is so like the point of it is to make users feel really secure in what they're targeting with the deletion.
I agree with you that probably the most common is going to be more of a sanity check, rather than I really want a line item veto deletions. Makes sense.
I'm also leaning towards this idea, showing users a list of every resource and expecting why or no. Because I'm not sure that there is a clear benefit of supporting partial deletion. There are a lot of resources, and I don't know if there is any use case user yes one resource and no the other one, and that will partially deletion looks to me a rare case. Instead, we can show everything and yes or no. As you said, it would be a good sanity check because user wants that. As a starter,
Interesting. Oh, sorry.
of course. As a starting point, yeah. Please, I'm done.
Oh, there is an interesting use case for the line item veto. You think about like in graphical console, so they usually have a table, each row has a little delete icon or something. And I found users find that kind of experience helpful as for really just they're not quite sure what pods they have, but when they see it, they'll know it. And in that use case, the graphical experiences usually win out in a major way because you don't have to worry about listing and then copying. You get that kind of all-in-one experience. But that maybe you just go to the console for that. I don't know.
I think yeah, the point is really good that supporting line item thing is kind of a different feature than what we provide today. That it allows you to select a set that is not selectable with our current commands. That leads me to lean even harder in the direction of the full list as the simpler starting point, as it's like it just lets you veto or not the current functionality. So that seems like the right place to go. And I wondered if for the line item based one, would there be some sort of workflow that folks could set up for themselves where they pipe an individual list through to RM-I and then it would sort of like go one at a time? Like maybe people could still sort of hack that together if that's what they wanted once interactive exists.
Yeah, they can always do it. They can always do a kubectl get and then copy and paste. Yeah, it works. Kubectl delete, they copy and paste the ones they want. It's this, so that would definitely be gloss, as opposed to I think what was proposed here is the shooting yourself in the foot problem, which seems much more egregious.
Right.
So are we coming towards a conclusion? Arda, are you getting what you need?
Not yet. I have an idea, but
Have we coalesced on a particular option or no?
To me, the majority is clearly towards the list all options, list all resources we're going to remove, and then make decisions. Let's start with that, and then we can, like I said, let's hide the flag as an experimental, clearly mark it as such, with the potential to change in the future, and let's roll it out to the users, and based on the feedback, we can make further choices.
Do you mean with the environment variable like we do for alpha features, or do you mean something else in this case?
No, I'll probably just clearly mark the flag as an experimental and in a description. And then we'll see what people will tell about the functionality.
Makes sense. Thanks. In terms of backwards compatibility, I think we are mostly this flag will be used by real users instead CI scripts and etc. And I believe that we have an option to choose one another time after time. I'm fine with that. Thanks.
Okay, I've attempted to capture the back and forth of the discussion, but I might not have been completely accurate. And so if anybody would like to amend those notes, please do. I think that the decision that Maciej just enumerated we're leaning towards an experimental flag with the potential to change in the future, where we list all, and then in the yes or no is for the entire list. Does that sound about right?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks, Arda. Is it okay if I move to the next item, Arda?
Yes, thanks.
Sorry, Sean, can I just ask a question quickly?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. Katrina and I are working on Prune. I just wanted to ask, do we want to think about supporting this yes/no for things that are going to be in Prune? I'm not asking you to do it. I'm saying, like, when we're building it, should we think about that coming up in future? So Prune will delete some objects, presumably. Maybe users might want an interactive mode on that also.
Is prune under the covers invoking delete command, or as in the actual delete command, or it's directly invoking delete against the fine?
It will, well, we haven't written it yet, but it will presumably directly invoke the delete verb on the API server. But that doesn't mean we couldn't present the same list, right?
It's a potential for expansion, but I wouldn't make any final calls, especially that we don't have like completely clear picture about what the interactive should look like, even for delete for starters. So.
Cool, thank you.
I think it's a really interesting idea, though. Like we get the same sort of complaints with pruning as we do with the delete command. So it's a good point. I think we would need to think about what interactive sounds like it means on apply, because pruning is just a sub feature of apply. So I think like users, if they do apply-i or whatever, they're going to expect more than just interactive prune, like interactive, I don't know, diff approval or something. So it might be a little hard, but definitely worth thinking about.
Yeah, one of the things I worry about is that it already feels like, at least with the current prune, where you've got prune allow list and you've got the labels and you've got the prune flag, there's already a lot of kind of noise going on. And then if you also wanted to specify, well, I want to do this interactively, that might be like this other fourth dimension, which might make it. So I think that this command already is difficult to use correctly. Although the cap is there to fix a lot of that. My worry would be that it would add an extra dimension of complexity, and yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, to be clear, we wouldn't introduce it to the existing pruning. This would only be for the new one after it graduates. I don't think we want to touch the old one.
Right. Well, after we've kind of digested that, maybe we could come back to it in the next meeting. What do you think, Justin?
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. I just want to get some quick feedback. Thank you.
Cool. Well, we could move on to the next item with Marley. Are you available?
Yep. Okay, so I have made some updates to the initial QRC implementation. They're not actually in that PR. That's just where I'm managing everything. I made a separate branch just because I was kind of messing around with it still. So I am working on basically, like, my main questions for today are, do we think that we should allow aliases to be run from like the top level? So basically like kubectl and then run the next command being like get dbprod, which will run get pods and then have a bunch of flags that specifies which pods it's going to get. The way that it works now is that you would have to run kubectl get and then get dbprod, which also doesn't work because of other things that I'm fighting with right now. But will probably work in the future.
So you'd like, just so we're clear, Marley, you'd like feedback on if we're going to allow aliases,
Specifically at the top level. So running kubectl, just kubectl get dbprod, all is one word. Or do we want it to be within the subcommands itself, like kubectl space get space dbprod? There's obviously not much difference between those two commands. Which is why I'm leaning towards the latter than the former.
How does it work with Git's aliases? Actually, just looking at mine, I've only defined top level aliases. I didn't even know you could. Can you define sub aliases in Git? In the Git config?
Git GIT or Git GET?
Oh, Git like GIT, yeah. In my Git config, I would define some aliases, but they're always top level aliases, I think.
Yeah. So initially that's why I assumed that it would be the former than the latter, but the way that Cobra works makes setting the aliases at the subcommand level dramatically easier than at the top level. Because what I was doing initially was just intercepting the user input and then looking up what was supplied at the command line and doing a lot of ugly string parsing and manipulation to make this happen. And Mache made a PR that used a lot more of the native Cobra features to make it a lot easier. So if we're going to use the native Cobra features, subcommands would be significantly easier than doing them at the top level.
I was initially thinking only about the top level. Just like Nick mentioned, the only Git aliases that I have are top level, because that's the whole point, to be able to get rid of the necessity to write, I don't know, whatever long commands, and replace that with a whatever alias or shortcut you want to come up with. I'm trying to remind what I did in that PR of mine. But if I remember correctly, I just injected new commands at the top level, basically.
Let me grab the PR and
yeah, I'm just looking at that PR of mine.
Yeah.
Where it was basically
chat for others.
Oh, there's the ability to add aliases per command.
Right.
But even without that functionality, I could probably imagine injecting new commands with different names, injecting specific even subcommands with new names. I'm not sure that would work. Theoretically, that should, yes.
Yeah, I assume that there's a way to do this. I just need to figure out what the way to do it is that doesn't require me to do what I was doing before, because what I was doing before is pretty unsustainable.
So the feedback you're asking for is about the top level versus subcommand aliases. Does that sound about right, Marley?
Correct, yeah.
And Mache is leaning towards basically only the top level aliases. Did that sound correct, Mache?
Yeah, I mean, it's still very early at the very early stages. So having something and then work on top of that, I wouldn't worry so much about the end shape of this PR. The goal is to start writing something, see where we can actually go, where we can get with both Cobra and the functionalities that it exposes, or how much we would have to hack around Cobra. Additionally, if we decide to modify Cobra itself, we have a good relationship with one of the developers of Cobra. We could probably suggest a reasonable addition to the Cobra itself, if that will be required. But it's always better to start with something simple, and then we can work our way up.
Right. Yeah, and I ran into some stuff like 10 minutes ago that I didn't realize was going to be a problem. Like if args are required, the way that I have this put together right now is not going to work. And I'm not 100% sure why, but so I'm gonna have to figure out some ways around some of this stuff still. It's not really we'll figure out where it's at. Yeah. Okay.
Does that give you enough to make progress until the next meeting?
Yeah.
You didn't sound completely convinced there.
Well,
what else?
20
What else
minutes
do you need?
ago, I would have said definitely, but then I tried to run Git pods on a real cluster and it broke horribly. And so I'm not very confident anymore.
Can
Katrina
I
has a
suggest something? Sorry.
Go ahead, Katrina. I'll get you next.
Oh, sorry. Why don't we start with just overriding flags instead proposing aliases? Maybe we can do it later as a starter or simpler. Just an idea.
Oh, I mean, I have that too. That's the part that I need less help on because it's pretty much done.
Yeah.
My question is sort of related to that. Like, it sounds like we're discussing what the feature itself is. So I just wanted to clarify, like, what the stage of this is? Like, are we doing experiments to inform an update to the CAP, or are we trying to implement the CAP and sort of changing our minds about maybe what the feature should be, which is fine. And is this targeting the release? I just wanted to clarify like what we're going for at this point.
I don't think that we have any of this is like substantially changing what the KEP should be. The goals for the KEP just state enable users to find kubectl command aliases. It doesn't really specify how we accomplish that.
Right, so maybe the KEP was very specific.
Right.
Like it's pretty different feature to have aliases on flags versus on subcommands versus root level, like from a user experience point of view. So I was wondering if that had been specified.
Yeah. Yeah, it hasn't really been specified in the KEP. And the way that I have it implemented now, the aliases themselves are mostly structured around just having a set of flags that an alias would have, basically, rather than like, I don't know. And yeah, I'm not really sure what else we would have been doing with it, but yeah, that's basically what it does. Is the aliases themselves have a bunch of flags that get parsed out into the command as being the what the alias specifies or refers to. And that's distinct from the default flags, which are set always on all commands, or not all commands, but like whatever command is specified, then it gets specified whenever that command is run, unless it gets overridden by a user supplied flag.
I think we can merge defaulting flags PR first, and we can move forward to other ones. We don't need to have a fully implemented kuberc PR.
Yeah, I would say sans the like default flag, like a flag that's meant to be supplied to every single command, no matter what. The default flags is pretty solid so far as I can tell anyway.
I just checked though, and this KEP is not approved for inclusion in the release.
Right.
So I don't think we can actually do it.
Looking for 127. The idea was to try to figure out what is missing in the KEP still, and eventually, once we are roughly certain about the shape of the PR, we can figure out when it'll be included.
Okay, so we aren't merging this code. We're using the PR to inform the KEP, and then we'll move forward.
Yeah,
Cool.
There's like a bunch of back and forth, various ideas, and what it could potentially look like. What we're trying to figure out at this stage. So.
Okay, that definitely answers my question. Thank you.
So do we have enough to move forward with? So we don't have a deadline of 3 weeks from now, since it's not going to be included in 127. Do you think that you have enough to move forward with, Marley, to make some progress on this PR to inform the KEP?
Yeah. I also have a couple other requests besides that one question. So the second question is, does anybody know how I would, or I don't know, does anybody have any suggestions on intercepting top level like -- cube config flags? Because I cannot make that work. I don't know what it's doing. I know that it needs to, I know where it needs to happen, like theoretically, according to the Cobra docs, but I cannot for the life of me find the point where we're after creating all the flags, but before we're actually accessing them. And we don't need to take up time with that. Just throwing that out into the ether to see if anybody happens to know where we would be doing that.
Can you repeat your question?
So I can intercept flags and inject defaults for everything except for the like persistent flags of the kubekettle parent, like root CMD object. And I've not been able to find where I can have those flags be parsed and have it actually do anything so far. And I know from the Cobra docs, it says that they have to be done. It has to be after the flags have all been set. So if you set a flag after you parse, it overwrites everything from what I can tell. And then it has to come before the command starts to actually interact with the flags, which is very strange to me, but.
Eddie writes that maybe that would be where we would need to change Cobra. On the other hand, I'm wondering, is it actually something that we do want to change and allow? Why we would want to modify the top level flags for kubectl?
So for me, the main use case that I can think of is like specifically setting the kube config flag would be something that I imagine that a lot of people would find useful. There's, I don't know, there's a lot of other flags that I think would probably be good, but they're all like, what do you call it? Like REST client config options. I don't know how important that would be to anybody specifically, but it is something that I think would be probably pretty useful to at least one person in the world. We can also just like skip it since it's what do you call it?
Is this for you want to make an alias that has a special kube config, or is this a separate issue from alias?
This is specifically for setting default flags that get passed at like every time a kubectl command is run.
I see.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of this stuff probably gets done just by virtue of the kube config itself. And so being able to set a specific kube config would probably be enough, because the rest of these are like specify the cached, or I guess that one's probably not defined in the kube config, but like the cluster name or auth infos or things like that are what's included in these timeouts, etc. So probably not really that important, but yeah.
Looking through them, some of them do seem pretty interesting though, in terms of being user specific preferences.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would prefer to not have to like have all these caveats of like can set these flags but can't set these ones, and you know, it just becomes very confusing for the user. And yeah.
The reason I asked about the alias intersections, I would have thought that in Git I can make an alias which is prefix with an exclamation point, which basically says invoke another alias. And so if I wanted to make an alias, for example, that says that's special to a particular context, then I would make a bang alias that does a koop. Then I would just put the kubeconfig there right in my alias file, and you don't have to worry about it at all because it's just a re-invoke.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. If I could get aliases to work right, then that would be a good way to handle that, I suppose. However, that does just kind of abstract away the annoying problem of having to have that flag set in a bunch of different places when the whole point of the default flag is to get rid of having to set that in a bunch of different places.
I see.
Unfortunately, I don't have any practical advice. I'm not familiar with the code here, but I agree with your concern that like the user experience is some flags that seem very useful to be able to be set, not being supported will seem arbitrary and we'll get a lot of bug reports.
Mhm. Yeah, printing the flags is easy, but setting the flags is not. And I have no idea why. But yeah, I will continue to dig. If anybody, and I don't know, I guess I could also talk to the Cobra maintainer to find out more. But yeah, if anybody happens to have an aha moment, please let me know.
Sounds like you'll be quite the Cobra expert by the end of this.
Yeah, I had to learn JSON path, and now I have to learn Cobra. So this is wonderful. Really building myself a niche here. Okay, the last thing is for the KEP itself. There's this at the very bottom. There's alternatives, and it doesn't have anything in it. I mean, the obvious alternative here is just use an existing Linux RC file, or Windows has their own RC files technically, but you know, I don't think anybody can. Should I just add that to the KEP?
Sounds fine.
To address at least partially the question that you posed about injecting. If you look under how we create kubectl, how we create the factory, which is then being passed to all the commands. Around that time is also where you will be constructing the aliases and injecting them into the Cobra tree. I think roughly around that time, you should be also able to access config flags, which is one of the elements that holds at least partial information for kubeconfigs. Most likely, some of the global flags should be accessible there as well. So I would probably look somewhere along those lines to be able to affect the values from those flags.
Okay. Yeah, that's mostly where I was just copying and pasting functions all around the factory and couldn't figure it out, but I'll continue to investigate there more. All right, that is it for me then, unless anybody else has any other comments.
Okay, we could move to close here if we've finished on that item. I don't see any other items on the agenda. Is there anything else we should talk about before we close? Well, Well, okay. I really appreciate everybody participating and showing up. I hope that Arda and Marley got the feedback they need to make progress. If not, please contact us on Slack, and we will see you again in 2 weeks.
Thanks, bye.